nobody thinks they have trauma because we've all been shamed into not acknowledging our truth by the people who hurt us.
Yeah. I mean, how many conversations have you had with your family and friends about trauma, about their trauma? More likely than not, unless you've been forced. Trauma, it's not been a dinner table conversation because the belief is that your family, the people that you knew, the people that you know, don't have trauma.
Hey everybody, it's Bianca.
Welcome back, Evolvers. It's Emilia.
Every single one of us have been told this really, really destructive lie regarding trauma. And the sad truth is we were told this story by people who were really afraid to appear weak or less than. And it's caused so much pain and unnecessary suffering. I mean, how many people have you heard say, well, I didn't go to war. Well, at least I wasn't brutally assaulted, so I don't have trauma. What I experienced doesn't matter. And it's honestly just because I'm really sensitive.
Far too many people, to be honest. And I wish that there were, I wish what we knew now was given to our parents, our grandparents, and people of the past generation. Because for so many of us, we've heard that narrative or we've heard people talk about trauma. And it's only in that extreme vein where you have to have gone to war or experience a giant bomb or whatnot, like what we call big T traumas. And unfortunately that overshadows just how pervasive trauma really is, and it casts a shadow in the arena of like not self-identifying as people with trauma. I remember we did one of our first Out of the Muds, our free live virtual event, which was, really talking about trauma, and You Are Not Your Trauma, I think was the title. And in that, we really laid the groundwork of the fact that now all of the data that we see really starts to like endorse and stand this up. So we were kind of, in a way, pioneering the work, at least in our industry, and really as youngins. But trauma is not just what happens to you, although that is more often than not a lot of what we think, right? The events that we have, the experiences that we have. But it's far more what we're seeing in the research. It's far more of what happens inside of you. And Dr. Gabor Mate really pronounces this as his big, bold claim in I would say, in addition, and sitting on the shoulders of Bessar van der Kolk's work as well within trauma, and Peter Levine, some of these people or Peter Walker, people who are in this space who have had significant contributions to the scientific literature and research. It's far more about what happens inside of us, our emotional experience, and do we have people that we can turn to when shit hits the fan, when things happen that are wicked uncomfortable, that are so unnecessary and hurtful. I just got off the phone with one of my clients who, this is one of many conversations that I've had with people. In their childhood, they had experienced child molestation from someone that their parents had trusted them with, that they had no one to turn to, including their parents, their siblings, their teachers, no one that felt psychologically safe to actually talk about what they had experienced. And that, it's what happens inside of someone like that, not necessarily what happens to them, although we're not excusing any behaviors of what happened to him, right? And he's one of many, and that doesn't minimize it. That just magnifies how little we are actually working on the psychological safety that we all need. Because when we don't have psychological safety, someone to turn to, someone to talk to, be it friends, family, siblings, etc., because there's so much shame around what happens to us and what happens within inside of us, that gets stored in the body. Our cells suppress themselves, and the implications of that are really, really big.
I was on a call with a client yesterday, and we've been working a lot on his trauma and his trauma story, and him trying to work through the narratives that he's told himself about himself and what other people have tried to convince him, and just the really drastic way that his upbringing impacted him. And we're talking about some of the things that happened to him, and he's like, I feel like I'm in this loop of feeling all of the feelings about what happened to me and then going into complete denial that it wasn't that bad and that nothing ever happened, because
Yeah.
nobody in my life validates what happened to me. And I
Mm.
said, well, think about it. Why do you think that they're not validating what happened to you? And he was really like in distress, so he couldn't answer the question. And I was like, because they were the ones that caused it.
Mm.
And so they can't acknowledge what happened to you. They're not going to tell you, yeah, we really lied to you about what our financial situation was because we didn't want to spend money on you. And we had our own goals that, mattered more than us actually really taking care of you. And so
Mm.
we convinced you that we were poor and that it was your fault that we were poor and that we had no money because, if only we didn't have children, we wouldn't have struggled.
Oof.
It's like, imagine what that does to a child, feeling like
Mm.
you're the burden that's causing so much pain on your family. This is how trauma gets stored in our body. It's not just, this is the lie that we've all been told, that the only trauma are these massive ordeals. That is on one end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But in the middle of that are all of the micro tears, all of the terrible things that happened, but in small bursts over time that led to you feeling insignificant,
Mm.
unwanted, neglected, a burden, alone, ashamed, all of these really detrimental emotions and core beliefs.
Mm.
That's trauma. Feeling like your family is dirt poor, that your parents won't buy you clothes, you're getting tormented at school because everybody thinks you're poor and they're shitting on you for it. Then you
Mm.
come home and your family's shitting on your life, and then you don't have a safe space to go. It's like, what else are you going to do?
Mm.
You keep it all trapped in here. You suffocate yourself with it. You don't have anywhere to go. And then you're convinced you're the problem.
Oh yeah.
Trauma impacts us because of how it makes us feel, because of the interpretations and the lessons that we take from it. It's those little micro T traumas, the moderate T traumas, and the big T traumas. But most of us don't ever get the permission to acknowledge them because the exact people that hurt us are still denying the fact that they did it.
Yeah. It's brutal. I mean, I said in the beginning, how many of us have had round table conversations about family trauma and our epigenetic history and how trauma and interpersonal relationship dysfunction has impacted the family. It's not something that's like, oh, how were you treated dysfunctionally today at school? Or how dysfunctional were we today as a family? Like, that's not something that comes up at the dinner table, B. And, again, there's no shame on others that I'm casting in this. However, I am, as someone who is studying trauma, and you and I every single day are in dialogues that are creating that psychologically safe space for so many amazing individuals who have taken their trauma and tried their very best to integrate that as a part of who they are, and not the definition of who they are and who they're becoming. But when we are in these conversations every single day, B, it's like, whoa, what would happen? Just imagine if we had these conversations, if we acknowledged even at the very baseline that trauma is a thing that exists and it happens. Like I said this in Out of the Mud, if you have a brain, you've likely experienced some degree of trauma, because it's not just, again, what happens to you, it's what happens inside of you, how you're receiving and perceiving the moment. And you have someone that you can lean on to kind of get that energy, that that ick that you feel where something's not right or something's hurtful or harmful, or you're even living outside of authenticity. Because let's say, for example, your attachment bonds are asking you to do that, whether you're 2 years old or 14 years old. One of my favorite quotes around trauma and really helps to showcase the severity of it. It starts so young, where
Mm-hmm.
when attachment and authenticity are at odds, it is not authenticity that wins, it is attachment. So, what does that mean? Right? When we come into this world, we naturally want to attach to others, right? We've talked about this a lot at Evolve Ventures. We have a biological need for belonging as human beings, right? Like when you and I are out of sync with one another, there's a part of us that like knows it. We're programmed to know when we're maybe in dysfunction or conflict or something's happening, something's up, right? Are you okay? Is the question that people often volley to each other because we know we're not. That attachment to belong with one another, more often than not, is overpowering and overshadowing the encouragement to be your authentic self. So it's, to your point, it's a ton of micro T slices to your authenticity, to the integrity of who you are, showing up in that form with the people that you believe care about you the most. But then when you have certain situations, like for example, I really would love, let's sing XYZ someone birthday party, and all of a sudden you sing authentically to yourself, and it just so happens to be out of pitch of someone else. How you get made fun of, right? Do you start to silence yourself? Do you start to, maybe not sing so loud and proud? It's those tiny things that get logged in our body as not safe. This is not okay. Especially not okay to do here. And it's those little things that accumulate over time that we never work through in our body that really have a significant impact. Earlier this week too, I was having a conversation with someone who's a heavy cognitive processor. She spends a lot of time in her head, and again, nothing wrong with that, but there's a reason for that. How often are we balancing out spending quote unquote time in our body, in our head, and in our like energetic emotional spirit? A lot of us are encouraged, especially in Western cultures, to just live in our head, detach from the body. Don't talk about emotions. And when you're just always cognitively processing, the body isn't working through that stuff that gets stirred up within you. That has impacts, that has implications, right? That turns out to chronic disease, studies are showing, right? And so like it is so pervasive how much we need to regulate our nervous systems, how we need to retrain our minds, our bodies, our souls, and how we show up in the world so that we're not inducing traumatic experiences to others unintentionally. Not easy though.
The trauma that you don't process ends up being the physical ailments that you experience. Like
Yeah.
you said, there's direct correlation. We know now without a shadow of a doubt that trauma causes medical and physical diseases.
Yep. Direct causation.
Cancer,
Mm-hmm.
cancer, Alzheimer's disease, degenerative nerve diseases, um, gut issues. Almost everyone with
Inflammation. Yep.
inflammation, yep, heart disease, all of these really major issues. Anyone who has like gut problems, I guarantee you have crazy stress that you don't know how to handle that's getting stored in your body that's causing the gut issues that you're having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Even me, I've had chronic back pain for what year are we in? Almost 13 years now, 12, 13 years.
Yeah.
I know it's trauma related because
Yeah.
I've done every treatment under the sun and none of it's helped.
Yeah.
It's trauma related because nobody can figure out what it is. So it's like deductive reasoning, it's trauma. The trauma that we don't process, the trauma we shame ourselves for, the stressors and the experiences that we don't allow ourselves to feel validated in end up getting so tightly wound in our body. And it's why we all feel sick and unwell and holistically unhealthy. If I could give one final takeaway as we wrap this up for anyone listening to this, your trauma is real. Just because it doesn't look like what somebody else went through doesn't mean that it's not real, because it impacted you. You were the one who experienced it. Just because somebody else can't validate your experience doesn't mean that the way that you interpreted it isn't valid for you. Give yourself the permission to acknowledge that and to work through it.
I'm so glad you gave that permission slip, because if we really look at what trauma is, right? It's not necessarily what happened to you, although it's a part of that. It's what happens inside of you, i.e., the lasting psychological, emotional response that you have to a distressing event, to where your individual coping skills, it overwhelms that, and you're not able to continuously cope, and certainly not in an adaptive way that helps to be constructive to your long-term physiological and health states. Trauma is so pervasive, and more often than not, it's not our fault, and the shame that comes with that is what keeps you silent, and silence doesn't help you heal. So I also tack onto that, and I encourage everyone to have a conversation with a safe person, be it a friend, be it a coworker, be it a family member, a coach, a therapist. Whatever trauma you have, it's valid and it's worthy of talking about. Trust me. Trust me, trust me, trust me on that. I speak from not only, this end of the table, but also on the other end. Without speaking about it, it would certainly have created a ton of ailments in my life. So my final episode suggestion, if you like this episode, is number 333, why you don't trust yourself to make decisions. Often when it comes to traumatizing experiences, we slice ourselves out of connection from our own sense of self. And that is a cornerstone indicator that you have experienced some degree of trauma. So listen to that one. B, what's your suggestion?
343, how does your stress really shape you? All right, everybody. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please, please, please reach out. Let us help you work through your trauma. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.